Welcome to another episode of Whitetail Rendezvous, coming to you 6 days a week as we interview whitetail experts and hear their traditions and personal stories of the hunt. Learn more about the latest gear, discover proven tips, and the latest strategies so you can make your next hunt a success. Now here's your host, Bruce Hutchin.
Welcome to another episode of Whitetail Rendezvous. And I've got a good friend, Josh Honeycutt, with me this morning, and we're going to talk about August prep. And Josh is the deer hunting editor of Realtree.com. Josh, welcome to the show again.
Bruce, thanks for having me on. It's an honor.
Well, it's always a pleasure, sir. And I just enjoy talking with you and learning more about what you know and how well you share it in the written word. And so props to you. So, Josh, let's just jump right into it. What do you want to tell my listeners about what they should be doing right now? It's August, the season. Well, I saw a monster whitetail on social media taken in Florida over the weekend, just a huge one. So guys are deer hunting already, folks. So what should people be doing right now to get ready for the September opener for whitetails?
Yeah, I don't do a lot, to be honest. I traditionally don't do a lot in the month of August because I prefer to get it done already. I'm going to talk about both sides of that, if that's okay. Because here at home, here in Kentucky, where I've been hunting for a long time, traditionally get everything set up and done well in advance because I'm hunting properties that I've been hunting for a while now. Properties that I have permission on. I don't own land, but they're properties that I've had long-standing permission. So I try to get as much stuff done earlier in the year as possible. You do your postseason scouting right after the season closes during the winter and early spring. Get any kind of permanent stands hung that you want, that are in good locations. Get that done no later than midsummer or early summer. So I don't do a lot of work in the field during the month of August, but I do some stuff here at home. So the more stuff you can get done before August, the better, because I think our season opener is September 7th this year. So, if you can give them that at least a month, if not more, buffer without you really having to go into the field and invade and mess up any type of pattern they might have, the better, and if you can give them even more, 2 months, that's great. Now, so what I do is I try to get everything set up, stands, blinds. Obviously, if you're planting fall food plots, you're going to go in there and plant fall food plots during the month of August or September. But, as far as being, in there and leaving scent and being somewhat intrusive, I try to get that stuff done well before August. So in that scenario, really all that I do during that month of August is if I'm planting any last minute micro plots, I'll plant those toward the middle of August. Usually it depends on the rain. If we have rain in the forecast, I'll jump on it. But sometimes it can go from as early August to early September, depending on what the weather and the temperature and the specific scenario might be. So that's obviously something that I do during the month of August. Something else that I continue to do is monitor trail cameras. I check cameras once a month during the preseason. So, I'll check them probably around the end. I check them around the end of July, and then I'll check them again around the end of August. So that's something that I do, but that's only one time in the field. In every, and I try to make sure I keep in mind wind directions when I'm doing that and leave as little ground scent as possible. So that's something I'm obviously doing in August. I don't do a lot of tree stand work during the month of August under this scenario that I'm talking about right now. If I don't get a tree stand hung that I want hung in a location by, say, midsummer, I'm not going to go in there and hang that stand at all. What I'll do is I will go in and hang and hunt once the season opens. I feel like you're better off that way. If you try to go in there and hang a tree stand under this scenario, then you can do more harm than good by trying to go in there 2 weeks before the season or a week before the season and hang that stand. Now, I'm not saying every situation is like that, but most situations and most stand locations, you can do more harm than good. It's better to just take a pack in on your back and carry a stand and sticks or whatever type of climbing mechanism you're using, and do it the day you go in there to hunt. Maybe that's opening day. Maybe it's a couple days after the season, whenever that might be. But especially for an early season spot. Now, if you have like rut spots that you're not going to be hunting for like 2 or 3 months, then that's a little different. But as far as early season prep goes and getting things ready for that first week or so of the season, I would rather just go in and hang and hunt and not hang that stand if I haven't already got it done within a month to 2 months of the open.
How many trail cameras you running?
It varies. Right now here in Kentucky, I want to say that I've got about 35, but that's spread over 4 different properties. And those properties range anywhere from 50 acres to about 250 acres.
All right. And so let's talk about, you got 35. So you have to pull 35 cards?
Yeah, I don't do that all in one day, obviously. All these properties are pretty close to one another. I would say they're within a 30-minute radius of one another. So usually when I do camera checks, it takes about 2 days. And I don't like, I won't do it really early of a morning, and I won't do it really late of an afternoon when deer are moving. I'll kind of keep it between, say, 9 or 10 o'clock and maybe at the latest 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Of course, this is all central time for me. So basically the first few hours of the day and the last few hours of the day, I don't check trail camera because I don't want to go in there and bump deer that might be moving. I try to make sure that I'm doing my camera checks while they're, still bedded down. So with that, it usually takes me about 2 to 3 days, 2 days at best, 3 days at worst, to get all of that done.
Want to become a smarter deer hunter? Know when to hunt, where to hunt, how to hunt? Well, Deer Hunting Institute Part 1 was created to do exactly that, because many people have told me they struggle with spending all days in the woods and never seeing a deer, only shooting does and young deer, leaving the woods empty-handed way too many times. Found this wonderful, but just couldn't get on them, having difficult finding a place to hunt, recognizing possible mistakes you're making every year, having tried and failed to find qualified mentors who deliver results. If you had these frustrations or struggles, go to deerhuntinginstitute.com, and there you'll find a 13-module course to help you solve these problems. Again, go to deerhuntinginstitute.com and find some answers.
Now, put them out when in June or early July? Is that when you put your trail cameras out?
That's what I typically put them up on June 1st, right around June 1st, a little right on or a little after. And I'll usually let my cameras go until, antler drop. So basically I'm running cameras from around June 1st until, around the end of March.
Okay. So then you got a pretty good idea, one, what's coming and what went through hunting season. And so then you can take a look and say, okay, here's the information I've got. Here's the bucks that, made it through. And then you can set up and think about the coming season.
Absolutely. A good point to this is a deer that I'm actually going to be hunting or potentially be hunting this fall. He's a deer that I call Tanker. I'm not a big guy when it comes to naming deer, but, he's a cantankerous old fart. So, he got the name Tanker. He's a deer I've been following for about 3 years now. He's a main frame 148, but he's got split 2s, split 3s on his right side, and then he's probably got about 4 or 5 tines that are all 2 to 3 inches each. So all in all, he's about 160-inch gross, non-typical. And this is a deer that I've followed for the last 3 years. This is the first year that I may change that. There's some other deer that I've got my eye on. So I don't know for sure that I'll hunt this deer, but if I do, it'll be the first time that I hunt him, even though I've followed him for about 3 years now. And to your point, figuring out what deer made it through the season and, having a kind of a year-round scope and a year-round perspective, you gain a lot of intel during that time too. And obviously, I knew that deer was still alive because I had pictures of him all the way up until he shed his antlers. And interestingly enough, his core area doesn't change very much between the early season and the late season either. There's a slight shift during the rut. He tends to move just a hair further north during the rut, but he's a pretty big homebody. But that's a good example of what you're saying. Being able to have those cameras up, I knew, whenever he dropped his antlers last year, that more than likely he was going to be back again for the 2019 season. And sure enough, unless something's changed since I glassed him from afar a few days ago. That's still the case.
So you're big on long distance scouting, aren't you?
Yep. And that's the thing that I was going to talk about the most. That's my biggest, I guess, so to speak, during the month of August, is glassing from afar where I can. Can't do that on every property that I hunt. I hunt some hills and some hollers that don't have big bean fields or big ag fields. So I can't do that everywhere I hunt, but there's some places that I can, and this was one of them. So that is something that I like to do during the month of August. I like to get back off the deer and glass them from afar. Trail cameras are good, but they don't tell the whole story. Trail cameras, while they verify that deer are there, and they can even tell you which direction deer are bedding, which direction they're feeding. Whenever you look at that first photo in that series of photos that you get, or the last photo in the series of photos that you get, what direction the deer is pointing. Now, that gives you a lot of information. You got to have your trail camera set up in the right way to really maximize and the validity of that first photo, because deer meander, they twist and turn. So you got to make sure you got your cameras in position where that tactic is most reliable. But, trail cameras can be deceiving. So I definitely like to glass from afar on properties that allow that, based on the terrain and whether there's big open fields or not. But it is a very helpful tool for me. And it's no different than the concept of hunting from an observation stand. It's the same concept. You're just doing it during the summer before the season opens.
How do you keep track of all this information? 35 cameras. I don't know how many, frames you get from each camera if you let them run for a month. I mean, that's a lot of data. How do you just organize that? Because I get people like myself, they're just scratching their head. Holy, how do you make sense of that?
Yeah. So as far as, trail camera locations go and tree stand locations go, I have apps on my phone for that. Back before apps, I would mark them on aerial maps. I would plot where my stands and my trail cameras were located. Because honestly, before I started doing that, I would forget where they were. And then, I'd be walking through the woods after deer season and like, oh, well, I put that camera out a year and a half ago. I thought I lost it. And I had, but I just forgotten where I put it. So, what I do is I use 2 different apps. I actually use 3 different apps. I use Onyx. Onyx is great when it comes to looking at topography, looking at the different map layers that they have. So I use Onyx for that. But as far as keeping my tree stand locations straight, I mark all of my stand locations, whether it's actual permanent sets that I already have or potential spots for hanging hunts. I keep track of all of that in Hunt Stand. And I keep track of all of my trail camera locations in Scout Look. Now, you can do all of that in one app, but I have found that, sometimes, especially on the mobile versions of those apps, it can kind of get clobbered up. And whenever you put too much information on those maps, it gets difficult and things kind of start to blur together. And I found it simpler to do it that way. As far as
it's chaotic. That's all I can say. It gets chaotic.
Yeah. And now, as far as keeping trail camera photos straight, I never delete a trail camera photo. And I think I have hard drives that's got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands. I know for sure probably over 500,000 photos. So, and I don't delete them. I keep them because that's valuable information, especially if you're hunting the same property from year to year. And even if you're not, there's so much you can learn by studying trail cameras. Now, you've got to put in a little effort to do it. I think the biggest lesson when it comes to studying trail cameras photos is looking at the date and the timestamp on that trail camera photo, looking at the behavior of that deer, whether, how it was acting, whether it was a nighttime or daytime photo. But, the nighttime stuff doesn't, I don't study that as much. But anytime I get a daylight trail camera picture of a mature deer, I study that thing. And the best way to do that is to go back and look at the historical weather data on that day at that time for that specific location that deer was in. Most of the time, you're looking at wind directions, and you're looking at it in correlation with what direction that deer came from, aka, especially if it's an afternoon. So let's say it's an afternoon. If it's a daylight, or if it's a early afternoon or late afternoon, but daylight trail camera photo, you want to look at that first photo in the series of photos, in whichever direction his butt is pointing in. More times than not, if you have your cameras in a good location to take advantage of this tactic, it's going to point towards bed. Same thing in reverse. If you have that thing set up on a trail that's between bed and feed, and it's early morning just after daybreak, whichever direction his head is pointing in, is the general direction more times than not his bedding areas. Now, that's not always foolproof. It's not 100%, and I don't know exactly how effective it is. If I had to guess, I'd say that tactic's about 70% accurate, maybe 75, because deer, I've heard stories of deer doing this. I've seen deer do it myself. Sometimes deer will come in and fish hook in front of a camera, especially if you've got like a mock scrape out, or if you've got bait out, if you've got mineral out. Sometimes those deer will circle downwind to that camera, or that mock scrape, or that scrape, or that bait site, or that mineral lick, whatever it is. If you have something in front of that camera that's actually drawing the attention of deer, a lot of times those mature deer will fish hook and come in from the downwind side. So it's not always accurate, but depending on the buck's individual personality, not all deer do that. So it's something to keep in mind. You don't want to 100% go on that particular tactic, but it's something that has proven to be effective for me throughout the years.
Do you want to become a smarter whitetail hunter, knowing when to hunt, where to hunt, how to hunt? Over the past 4 years, people have asked me, hey, I'm struggling with spending all day in the woods and never seeing a deer, only getting opportunities at doe or young bucks, leaving the woods empty-handed too many seasons. Located the deer of a lifetime, but just flat out missed. Having difficulties finding a place to hunt, recognizing mistakes that you're making over and over again, and you want to eliminate them. Having tried and failed to find qualified mentors. Well, you've come to the right place. Why? Because Deer Hunting Institute Part 1 was created by me, Bruce Hutchin. It's a 13-module course that'll talk about being lost in the deer hunting forest. Never hunted. What is a hunter? What is an adult onset hunter? What rules apply? Finding a mentor, choosing a weapon, finding a place to hunt, scouting a hunt location, stand sites, stand access and exit, reading sign, and when to hunt. All these are available for you at deerhuntinginstitute.com. Go now to deerhuntinginstitute.com and sign up for the best deer hunting course in America.
I know some people keep track of barometric pressure. They keep track of the wind. Also, they keep track of the moon phase. I mean, you get all this data because, once it's time and date stamped, you know exactly basically what has happened, weather-wise. How important is that to you?
Really, I put the most stock in 2 to 3 things. The first thing I look at when it comes to studying these pictures is wind direction, because you're not going to have a weather event every day, or even on every day that you get a daylight photo. So the biggest factor, and I think it's far and away the most important, is what direction that wind is blowing in whenever you got that daylight trail camera photo. I'm not saying deer walk into the wind with their nose into the wind every day. That's not the case. If it was, every deer would be sunbathing over there on the Pacific. But, it's one of those things where I think that's the most important factor. I also like to pay attention for particular rain events. If there was a pop-up shower on that day, pop-up showers, especially when that late of an afternoon, tend to get deer up on their feet a little sooner. I've seen it happen too many times for it not to be true. So that's something that I look for is rain events, maybe a little pop-up thunder shower. Obviously big fronts, those, I go back and look for those as well. The weather is the key thing. Now, I don't personally really pay much attention to moon phase. Now, I know a lot of hunters do it. I'm not saying they're wrong, but I've personally not seen a huge correlation in my own hunting and my own personal recreational research. I've not seen as much of a correlation in movement and moon phase. What I do think that there might be something to, and I'm still kind of trying, the jury in my mind is still out on that. I'm still trying, I know there's been other research on it, and I'm not questioning that research, but as far as just verifying it and studying it on my own, I think there might be a little something to it. I don't know how big of an influence it is, but that is the moon position, not moon phase, but moon position. There's talk of the overhead underfoot, and whenever the overhead and underfoot line up with dawn and dusk, a lot of the times that kind of can spark some daylight activity. Now, again, that's something that everybody can draw their own conclusion on, but that's something that I go back and look for to see if that overhead underfoot correlated with dawn and dusk or correlated with the timing of that daylight trail camera photo.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about the moon, and I used to fish by the moon. the moon phases. And pretty much I knew when the fish were going to hit, this especially, trolling in Lake Michigan and also in salt water. I just found it worked. It worked for me. But having said that, I've talked to enough people, throughout the podcast that it kind of wavers. I guess that's the thing. So here's what I'd say to you listeners. If you believe in the moon phase and follow the moon phase and charted the moon phase and you've been successful in the moon phase, keep doing it. Period. I mean,
yes, if something's working for you, something's working for you. That's cool.
Yeah, and just keep doing it. Hey, let's talk about practice. I know you're an archer. How much do you practice throughout the year, and are you practicing more or less during the month of August?
Well, I'll answer that, and then I want to go real fast. I don't want to divert us off, but I wanted to say something else on that other topic real briefly. But yeah, I will say this. I don't practice as nearly as much as I should. So I should get a smack on the wrist for that. I still do shoot my bow. Absolutely. I shoot my bow. I probably don't shoot it as often as I would like because I'm so busy. But, because it's something that I have a personal goal to get better at. Now, I feel like I'm a pretty decent shot. I hold my own. I used to go and shoot some 3D archery tournaments and did pretty well. But it's just one of those things where some people can go out there and not shoot their bow for months and then pick it back up and then they're shooting just as good as they did before. Before they took their their little hiatus or their little break from their routine. And then some people have to shoot, on a schedule regularly to maintain what they've built up. So I guess the biggest thing when it comes to shooting a bow and getting prepped is figure out which category you're in, and then just make sure you tune your prescription, your practice prescription, so to speak, to what you need individually, personally.
The only thing, and I learned this a long time ago from a pretty good archer, and what he said Bruce, as it get close to the season, take one arrow and go out to your max yardage, whatever that is. And folks, you should know your max yardage, that you can ethically kill a deer, period. So set that up, take that one arrow, and then shoot it. See where it goes. Yep. Then you back into your 40-yard pin and 30-yard pin and 20-yard pin, because I think you'd agree, Josh, that most deer are killed, 20 or 30 yards? Most whitetails are killed at 20 or 30 yards. Is that a fair statement?
I would think so. I don't have any research in front of me, but I've heard that statistic quoted. But that's exactly what my practice regimen is during the last couple months leading up to season. I don't go out there and shoot 30 arrows. Actually, I never do that. I never go out and shoot 30 arrows unless I'm shooting like a 3D course. And, I might shoot that many, obviously, between some practice and the actual course itself, I might end up shooting quite a few arrows on a day like that. But, when it's just I'm out here in my yard, I'm at home, maybe it's an afternoon or it's a weekend or whatever it might be. When I shoot my bow, I do exactly what you just said. And I'll shoot mine all the way out to about 70. I don't shoot whitetails at 70 yards, but I'll shoot one arrow all the way out to 70, and then I'll come back and shoot one more at 20 or 30. So I'll start at 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, and then I'll come back in and finish up with an arrow at 20. My maximum yardage is about 40. I have shot deer out to about 50, but I pretty much set myself at a limit of 40 yards. But I shoot at those longer distances just to improve my skill and improve my confidence at those ranges where I actually do shoot a deer.
The buck you got last year, how close was he?
I want to say he was 25 yards.
Yep. And you watched him come all the way across, didn't you?
Yep. I watched him come all the way across that opening 2 days in a row. And then, that's about how far he was, about 25 yards.
And the first time you saw him, how far away was he?
I saw him on the 4th day of the season, I think, if I'm remembering correctly. And I was in one stand location, and he came across when I first saw him for the very first time on the 4th day of the season, the day before I killed him, that would have been about 150 yards probably, was whenever he first came out. And then so, I figured, there's a good chance he could do the same thing the next day because the wind direction was going to be the same. Had an easterly-ish wind both days, and it was projected to be the same the next day. So I was like, if he come out right there on an east wind, he's probably going to do it again, or there's at least a good chance. Because I know he's still going to the same food source. There was a soybean field to the south on the neighboring property. and he was bedding on us. And so he was running north to south, basically from bed to feed, and the wind was easterly, and it was basically blowing the tree line I was in. So I'm going to try to illustrate here. There was a bedding area up here, food destination down here to the south. So you got bedding area to the north, feed destination to the south. Then right here, you've kind of got this like staging area type thing. It was mostly filled with clover. It was an old hay field is what it was. But it was mostly clover. And so basically he was running north to south. But the tree line that I was in, also the edge of that tree line ran north to south. And so all this timber to the east, the wind would blow with an easterly wind from that timber out into this open field that he was passing through to get into the soybean field. So whenever he come out of that bedding area to the north, he was going to be able to smell anything in that timber or any hunter in that timber or along that timber edge. But whenever the next day came and I actually did a hanging hunt and got closer to him, that way I could have a better shot at killing the deer, because he didn't quite make it to me in time for, legal. He got basically, by the time he got to me on the day before I killed him, it was past legal shooting light. So I was like, well, I've got to cut that distance down and get a little bit closer to him. And so that's what I did the next day. But my wind was just northerly enough. It ended up being about like northeast instead of being due east. And so I was like, well, I can probably get away with that. And so I was basically hunting what I call and what other people such as Dan Infault and other really good hunters refer to as a just off wind. And I'm not even putting myself in the same category as Dan Infault. Don't think I am. But I think he's the reason I say his name is I think he was the first person I ever heard referred to it as that. But I ended up having a northeasterly wind. And basically, I think I stepped it off after it was over with. And my scent cone was hitting the ground, I want to say, 10 to 15 yards in front of where I stopped him and shot him. So if he'd have made it another 10, 15 steps, it'd been game over.
Wow. Think about that.
Yeah. But I think that's what gave him the confidence to come out during daylight, was the fact that he was like, I can smell everything that's in that woods and I can see everything in this field. And I think that's why, as big and old a deer as he was willing to come out during daylight, because it was pretty much bulletproof for him to do so, unless somebody was just crazy enough like me to hunt that spot on just off wind.
Hey, thanks for listening to the show tonight. Before we go, can I take a moment and say thank you? Listen, as we started the Whitetail Rendezvous podcast journey, we had no idea what to expect. But after 4 years, we received a ton of feedback from our over 400,000 listeners and climbing to 500,000. Speaking of which, we are now closing in on over 600 featured guests. Thank you. And a quick shout out to all those who have left an iTunes review and your feedback. I get those and really appreciate it. And it's awesome to see what you have to say, and we do read every single one of them. And I just want you to know that I am incredibly grateful for your kind words regarding the show. And all of the ratings and reviews help us attract more listeners. And if you're one of those new listeners, welcome. Great to have you. By the way, if you haven't taken the time to rate and review our show and like the Hunting on Private Land strategy on how to get permission to hunt a private property, go to whitetailrendezvous.com as a special gift for just rating and reviewing our show. When you get there, look for the start button to get the details. Listen, I'll share you the top technique from some of the top hunters in the country on how do they get permission to hunt on private land. I'll share with you the exact techniques they use to get permission. As my way of saying thanks for rating and reviewing the show on iTunes. So join us next time. And remember, we're all on this journey together, learning, sharing, and becoming 365 hunters.
What do you end up scoring?
He grossed right around 163.
Yeah, just a magnificent big eight.
Yep, very cool deer. Very cool deer.
Say, we took a little segue there. There was something that you wanted to mention. I hope you didn't forget.
Yeah, no, I don't want to discourage anybody from doing work, during the month of August if they have stuff they need to get done. And I'm doing the exact same thing. I actually just got a new property. I've been hunting Ohio because I hunt Ohio every year too. And I hunted the same property for 3 years. It was, it's 40-acre property. And I lost my access to that property at the end of this past season. And so I ended up getting a new property that was about 45 minutes away from there, still in southern Ohio. And I actually just gained the access to it like a week ago, 2 weeks ago. So, it's a new place I've never been on in my life. Obviously, I've never hung a stand there. And the season opens up. I don't know exactly when Ohio's opener is this year, but it's usually right around the end of September, right around the beginning of October, sometime in there. So obviously, I mean, if I don't get in there and do that stuff now, I'm not going to. And I like to hunt from permanent sets more than I do from, more than I like to do hanging hunts because, there's just obviously there's more that can go wrong. You can clink a stand and boom, it's over. If you're trying to go in there and do a hanging hunt. I still like hanging hunts, and I've done that. That's how I killed that deer last year here at home. But if I can hunt from a permanent stand, that I've already got set and hung and it's ready to go, I'd much rather do that because there's less that can go wrong. But, that is something that, like I said, even though I'm not doing a lot of in-the-field aggressive stuff here at home where I've already had long-standing permission in places that I'm hunting for multiple years or for consecutive years, that's one thing. But this is a property that I've never even looked at, never been on, never hunted, never put a stand on it, never put a camera on it. So I actually just went up there this weekend on Saturday, and me and my hunting buddy, we scoured the property. We didn't get to look at all of it, but we looked at a lot of it. I think the areas that were the most attractive via aerial anyway. And this property is 80 acres, but we basically scoured that property, tried to network the trails as fast as we could, look for deer sign tracks, old rubs, old scrapes. And we actually put out 5, 6, 7 camera locations. And the next time when we go up there, we're going to be hanging stands, and that's going to be in probably a week or two. So in an instance like that, somebody who just gains permission or just gets access to a property, I would still do all those things, especially if you've never been on the property, because you don't know what you don't know. And it's much, much better to go in there maybe once, at the most twice, and scout and learn the property and get your stands hung. It's much better to do that than to just blindly hunt the farm and not knowing anything about it.
So, folks, you've got a lot of information from Josh in this segment. This is going to be a 3-part segment, and Josh has graciously said that he would do this. So we're going to wrap up the August prep part. I think if you listen to this and then re-listen to it and then listen to it again, you're going to pick up some nuggets that'll help you, for the upcoming season. Josh, we'll be right back at you. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. Be sure to tune in tomorrow for another episode of Whitetail Rendezvous, where you can listen and learn from the experts so you can be more successful on your next hunt. Until next time, listen, learn, and succeed.